accepting your pilots along with your aircraft. It's a fine line to walk down. I would say that it goes back to what Alan was saying about drawing, folding the paper in half and saying, okay, it's a pilot that works for the owner, but are there other indications? And we said one of the things that you might want to do is to independently contract with those pilots. Yes, I know. This isn't a wink and a nod or to say, well, this is just paperwork for the lawyers. But to look behind that agreement and see if indeed those pilots are listening to and understand the responsibility to the certificate holder, even though they may in fact be employees, W-2 employees of the aircraft owner. All right, you are prohibited. Number 4, you are prohibited from transferring, surrendering, abrogation, or sharing of operational control responsibility to or with any party. You may not engage in any arrangement with any aircraft owner, lessor, or any other person or entity, such as an aircraft management entity, which allows the use of the aircraft for operations under these op specs, without a complete, effective, and sustainable transfer of operational control to the certificate holder for all Part 135 operations conducted under these op specs. And we proceed to give you a definition of what a sustainable transfer is. It's a transfer, a sustainable transfer is a transfer of operational control without any impediment by a contract, agreement, lease, or other written or verbal agreement between the owner, lessor, or other entity and any other entity that restricts any person or entity from transferring operational control to the certificate holder. That's a mouthful. What we were trying to get at there are, and we give you examples. Examples of such impediments are leases, mortgages, insurance, management agreements, or other agreements which limit the use of the aircraft to a particular party or purpose other than the certificate holder and its authorized kinds of operations. And then we note, see paragraph D5C. What we're trying to get at here was, bank owns the airplane, leases it to this person. This person is not a certificate holder. This certificate holder, or this person who is not a certificate holder, but in possession of an aircraft, then goes to a certificate holder and says, I want to put this airplane on your op specs, but I want to represent to the bank that I'm conducting the operation. We may not allow that, okay? Because they're not a certificate holder. That, you would be prohibited by these op specs by putting an aircraft on the op specs if that arrangement exists. So obviously, we have to be aware of all the different kinds of arrangements. I have a copy of a sublease. It's not unusual to receive a sublease in some of these, which means that there's another lease out there. Somebody else is doing something with this aircraft. And you'll see in paragraph D5C some of the requirements that we have placed on the certificate holder to ensure that there are no impediments to their ability to exercise operational control. If you want to say something is new here, that would be the only new thing I see here. Otherwise, everything else is already covered by rule. In fact, a lot of people have even criticized it for saying, you've just repeated the rule, why don't you shorten this thing up? We thought about it, but then on the other hand, we thought, all right, here's the document that you're going to use, that the operators are going to show to aircraft owners, that the principals are going to show to the certificate holders to say, you're not meeting this, you're not meeting this, and here's the definition of this. But with that said, have we thought of everything in here? No. It's not a perfect document. If you have any comments, issues about it, email myself or Hooper, either one of us, to with your comments. You didn't think about this, you didn't think about that. Trust me, we have a lot of comments in these areas. The next are the essential elements of operational control. You can obviously see an inspection item coming up here, can't you? So obviously the following items are essential elements of operational control and are required to be the components of the operational control system. Someone might write something that says you have to make sure that each one of these elements are present and that are satisfactory. I don't know, I might see that somewhere, say in an R item somewhere. 1, crew member requirements. Certificate holder may not conduct any operation under 135 of the regulations unless each certificate holder's crew members I won't read these because it's pretty much, you know, your direct employee or agent. Independent contractor, red flag. What do you mean independent contractor? I see, what do you mean by this? This person's not an employee or agent. Well, we want to get that squared away. Everybody is either a direct employee or an agent. Nothing else. And every aspect of 135 operation, including those aspects of any pre-flight, post-flight duties, typical is accountable once again for the actions or inactions of these persons. Obviously, they have to be trained and tested, so forth and so on. Each pilot must be specifically listed by name and airman certificate number on a list of pilots maintained by the certificate holder at its main base of operations. Does anybody believe this is a new requirement? If not, just go read the rule. This is already existing. I have unfortunately found in many cases this does not take. Many of these contract pilots are not actually listed by name and certificate number with the certificate holder, because the certificate holder didn't consider them their employees. After all, as one guy told me, I didn't train him. He was trained by flight safety. I said, really? I always loved those. Once again, you know, where were we here? I'm sorry. I'll cut down some of these. Aircraft requirements. The certificate holder may not conduct any operation on 135 unless each aircraft in its used in its 135 is owned by the certificate holder, remains without interruption in the certificate holder's legal and actual possession. I think Doug called that custody. Directly or through the certificate holder's employees and agents during all of its 135 flights, or is leased by the certificate holder, otherwise in legal custody of the certificate holder, and remains in the certificate holder's exclusive possession or custody during all of its 135 operations. And of course, for each aircraft which the certificate holder uses under these op specs, the aircraft owner or leasee, we know the leasee, the lessor is usually who? Aircraft owner. Leasee is usually the certificate holder, and at 99.99% of the time, who has operational control? The lessor. Okay. Or leasee of the aircraft may operate the aircraft under Part 91 under the control and responsibility, including potential liability for any unsafe operation of the owner or other leasee. I'll get that in just a minute. Sorry. That's okay. As long as the following condition is met. The certificate holder ensures that the maintenance of the aircraft continues to adhere to the certificate holder's maintenance program, inspection program, whatever it happens to be, at all times, or when, this is when you can operate under Part 91, or when the aircraft is returned to the certificate holder, but before the aircraft is operated under Part 135 again by the certificate holder, the aircraft undergoes an appropriate airworthiness conformity validation check. Does anybody know what I just said? Because I don't know. This last term, airworthiness conformity validation check, is a term of art. When we first started this, it said removed from the op specs. And people fainted right there. What we're saying is if this aircraft goes off or is out here flying under Part 91, and if at any time the certificate holder says, I don't know the maintenance status of the aircraft, or worse, I found out about it 2 weeks after the owner brought the airplane back to me, it used to read the airplane must be immediately removed from the op specs. Some of the folks in the industry said that was too harsh because after all, maybe no maintenance was performed on the aircraft. How do we know? So in a compromise, we said, all right, we will leave it up to the PMI to decide to what level of review needs to take place to ensure that the airplane is still airworthy. Now, does the FAA ensure that airplanes conform? No. That's up to the certificate holder. What you're doing is you're verifying the information that the certificate holder is providing. We have literally given the principal, the PMI, the authority to say, this plane doesn't move, this plane moves, whatever, after this is done. The message we were sending to the operators was, we wanted the airplane off the op specs. If that was too harsh, we still need a means or method to determine if that airplane is airworthy. And we said that we would provide guidance, but the authority would rest with the PMI. 300 is aware of this. I've asked him to give me some information on this one area. This is an important area. Now, obviously, with the message we're trying to say here, don't ever lose control of that aircraft, 135 operator, airworthiness-wise, because you're going to pay a penalty if you do. Don't say that the owner came in the middle of the night and stole the airplane and you have no idea where it is and you don't know its maintenance status, because you're going to be penalized for that. You are in control of that aircraft. Otherwise, call the police and tell them that somebody just stole your airplane, because we're expecting that you will maintain oversight and control of that aircraft at all times when it comes to its maintenance. Now, by the way, I said that. That's what the team told us. They said, this should always be, there should never be a time where the airworthiness status of that aircraft is ever in question. And you know what? I agreed with it. All right, exclusive aircraft use requirements. This already exists. At least one aircraft meets the requirements of at least one kind of operation. Yeah, I know. They get the 172 Hangar Queen and put her in the back and with the flat tires, and that's my exclusive use airplane. No, it has to be one of the aircraft that meets the requirements of at least one kind of operation. Well, if you're going to fly international operations, I don't know the last time I saw 172 flying from here to, I guess it could be done from here to Bourget, I guess. The operators say that that's a practice done by unscrupulous operators trying to defeat the FAA's exclusive use. That's what they told us. Unscrupulous operators. This aircraft, this exclusive aircraft, must remain in the certificate holder's exclusive legal possession and actual possession directly or through the certificate holder's employees or agents as specified in 135.25. The aircraft cannot be listed on any other Part 121 or 135 certificate holder's specs during the term of the exclusive use lease. Obviously, this becomes important when we find out that the same aircraft is being listed on multiple certificates. It is specifically prohibited here. Use of other business names. Certificate holder. Remember, these are all elements, critical elements of operational control. The certificate holder may not allow or create the circumstances that would enable any other entity to conduct a flight for compensation or hire under Parts 119, 121, 135 of the federal regulations as if that entity were the certificate holder. The certificate holder shall not operate an aircraft under 135 under the name or fictitious name of any other person or entity unless authorized by the FAA, paragraph A001. Such authorization does not, of course, authorize any person or entity other than the certificate holder to conduct any operations under the certificate or off specs, and we hold the certificate holder responsible for the safety of each of its 135 flights conducted under the various authorizations and may not allow the use of a fictitious name to obscure the certificate holder's responsibility and accountability to exercise operational control over its flights. Enough on DBAs. Hopefully we put that one to bed once and for all. Aircraft operation agreements and other arrangements. In accordance with 11953, the certificate holder may not wet lease, you know what a wet lease is, from or enter into any wet leasing arrangement with any person not authorized by the FAA to engage in common carriage, where that person provides an aircraft lease from a crew member, so forth and so on. This requirement does not prohibit the independent use of a crew member by the certificate holder when that crew member is also employed by the aircraft's owner or lessor. Again, this is an area that we are allowing, but we caution the use of the owner's pilots with the aircraft. They need to show, can we use the word compelling? A good case. Can't use compelling case. Good case to show us that that's not an illegal wet lease. Any agreement or arrangement between the certificate holder and the aircraft owner must fully explain how the certificate holder oversees and ensures only airworthy aircraft are used in its 135 operations. I know. Well, we have an approved program. Not so. That program, in fact, during satellite operations, I found gets pretty skimpy, or at least questions as to what actually is taking place and who is really overseeing the airworthiness of the aircraft. Satellite operations pose significant issues for both operators and the FAA. You need to nail this down, in other words. Certificate holders, Certificate holder's operational control system must include a system of ensuring that they have complete, effective, sustainable operational control over each aircraft operated under these op specs, and no surrender or loss of operational control exists. Certificate holder, by use of this system, must determine that no limitation exists. This is the new part. No limitation exists in any of its agreements or any agreement between an aircraft owner other than the certificate holder and any other party. And I want to emphasize, insurance companies, financial institutions, and others, which restricts the free transfer of operational control to the certificate holder or which otherwise limits the use of the aircraft to a person other than the certificate holder. Hence, this system must include, and these are three possible ways, we've given three possible ways that most operators have told us that they would go about meeting this requirement. They can either conduct a direct review of all available and known agreements concerning the aircraft. Obviously, you only know what you know. And then certify to us that they have reviewed all these agreements and there are no prohibitions in any agreements. Obviously, you would want to know, as Alan has pointed out, that if there is a prohibition that the aircraft can't be used in commercial operations, hey, we might want to know that, right? They can also make a written inquiry to all, or written query to all affected parties requesting documentation that no limitation exists. Some have decided that they'll simply write to banks and whatever and simply say, is there any limitation? We're about to use this aircraft, is there any limitation? Or third, and this is the one I think most will use, the certificate holder's notification of all affected parties that the certificate holder will use the aircraft in operations under these op specs. It's more or less the knowledge thing of saying, all right, Citibank, I can't think of the insurance companies, I intend to use this airplane. If you don't like that, you better get back to me and let me know, because I'm using the airplane. It's in 135 operations and we're using it. After taking such an action, should the certificate holder become aware of any additional agreements, the certificate holder must make this determination for that agreement. It's not a one-time thing. You don't just do it and say, well, that's good for the lifetime. If the agreement changes, if the insurance company changes, if anything changes, and the operator has knowledge of it, or you have knowledge of it, I don't know why you would have knowledge of it, the certificate holder wouldn't, then this same sort of due process or review that there's no limitations out there. Unfortunately, we have seen that there are limitations in some of these agreements that the certificate holder may or may not be aware of. In the Darby case, the certificate holder was aware that the bank had told Platinum that the airplane could not be used in commercial operations. They chose to disregard that. Obviously, well, anyway. If the certificate holder, also the certificate holder may not operate an aircraft in 135, which is subject to any agreement between the certificate holder and the aircraft owner or any leasee of the aircraft, if that agreement shifts liability and accountability for the safety of the certificate holder's Part 135 flight operations from the certificate holder to the aircraft owner or other parties. An example would include a lease which included a provision that the owner or lessor was responsible for civil liability in the event of 135 flights conducted under these op specs that result in any accident, incident, safety violation, injury, or death. Remember, that was the indemnification clause. We're suspicious of that kind of operation, and we put that in these op specs. Management personnel and persons authorized to exercise operational control. Prior to conducting a Part 135 flight or series of flights, at least one management person or their management person designee listed in paragraph A06. If you're going to have a designee, it's got to be in A006. Other than a pilot assigned to the specific flight or series of flights must determine and have sufficient knowledge of the following: whether each assigned crew member is qualified and eligible to serve as a required crew member in the aircraft and the type of operation which crew member is assigned, whether the aircraft assigned for use is listed in the op specs, specifically paragraph D85, and is airworthy under the certificate holder's FAA approved maintenance inspection airworthiness program is appropriate. Also, prior to conducting a Part 135 flight or series of flights, at least one management person or their management person designee listed in paragraph A006, or a non-management person listed in the certificate holder's general operations manual or equivalent must determine and have sufficient knowledge of the following: whether a 135 flight or series of flights can be initiated, conducted, or terminated safely in accordance with the authorization limitations, so forth and so on. Of course, that's operational control. You have basically the definition of operational control. This determination and knowledge in B1 may be made for the certificate holder by pilots and or flight crew members assigned to a flight or series of flights in accordance with the policies, procedures, and standards prescribed by the certificate holder. However, such determinations include, but are not limited to, visibility determinations, whether ICE is adhering to control surfaces, whether the aircraft has sufficient fuel, and whether it's in a condition for safe flight. We acknowledge the fact that pilots can make certain decisions or at least impart information to the certificate holder on certain areas that could affect whether or not the flight could be initiated, continued, or terminated. This is what gives them that authorization to do that. However, as the note says, such non-management persons shall meet the requirements of 11969D, and their names, titles, and duties, responsibilities, and authorities shall be specified in the General Operations Manual or equivalent. I don't know how many times I saw that some very nice administrative person within the company that just kind of collected the mail, you know. In the one case, fed the 2 cats that roamed around the hangar, and also exercised operational control over worldwide operations of large turbojet aircraft. It was absolutely incredible to me that this carrier had relinquished its entire operational control responsibilities to an unqualified person. And not to say that this person couldn't be qualified to make those kinds of decisions. It's just that if we're going to have these non-management persons making those kinds of decisions, then they have to meet the requirements of 11969D. I won't go over that, you can read that. And their names, titles, duties, and responsibilities will be specified in the owner's and the operators in the General Operations Manual. Number 7, operational control information requirements. This is the part where we impart this information to the certificate holder to the PIC. Prior to the certificate holder conducting any flight operation under Part 135, the certificate holder must provide information to the designated pilot in command that indicates which flight or series of flights will be conducted under Part 135, that indicates which Part 91 flights will be conducted by the certificate holder, and that the certificate holder is accountable and responsible for the safe operation of these flights or series of flights. Some of the operators have already told me, as I said, they're even going to release, oversee, review even the 91 flights. They said, even if the owner's on there, even if it's a 91 flight, we're still going to do it. We're going to control it. I can see where that would work, because I can certainly see where if at any point they lose control over that aircraft, where the airworthiness of the aircraft is ever brought into question, they could go through some sort of revalidation, conformity, whatever we called it as such, by the PMI to say, you know, this airplane, I don't know what happened. You show me what happened for those 6 hours this airplane was out of your control. Because I think it's unairworthy. If you don't have a system in place to verify that it was maintained and whatever, then I don't know. The system of operational control must ensure that each pilot is knowledgeable that the failure of a pilot to adhere to the carrier's directions and instructions or compliance with the directions or instructions from the aircraft owner, other than the certificate holder, or any other outside private person or private entity that are contrary to the certificate holder's directions or instructions while operating the aircraft under these specs may be contrary to 119 and/or 135 and therefore subject to legal enforcement action by the FAA. I said, I could see where operators put this at the bottom of a release document. Maybe a contract provision when they work with the pilot saying, I want you to know that the FAA requires that you follow everything that I tell you, not the aircraft owner. Of course, then somebody pointed out, yeah, but what about air traffic control instructions? What about NOTAMs and what? So we included these requirements do not apply to obviously air traffic control instruction, clearances, NOTAMs, or any cognizant foreign air traffic control or certainly they don't try, we're not trying to intercede or create problems with the aeronautical safety of flight information received by pilots or any emergency authority by pilots. Short of that, we want to make sure that as the owners want, or as the aircraft operators wanted, we want a clear message sent to those pilots that they're working for me, whether they're my direct employee, well obviously if they're a direct employee, or my specific agent. I want them to understand that I'm on the hook for their actions or inactions. I said, okay, we'll write that in there. Don't worry, we'll write that in there for you. All right. 7 elements of operational control. Yes, it's 4.5 pages long. Yes, it does contain information that's already in the rules. As Alan said, as Doug said, as I said, 95, 98% of it is already rules, case law, whatever. Much of the information came from our meeting with the industry. The industry has seen this. I would never speak for them and say they agree entirely with everything here. They agree that some of the provisions will be difficult for them, and they've asked for additional time frame to comply. Our original goal of August the 31st still stands. The director wants this out by August the 31st. What that means is you will receive an HBAT, some document. HBAT, because we normally disperse OPSPECs using the HBAT system. And it will tell you that as of August 31st, you're to issue this to the certificate holders, to each one of your 135 certificate holders. And like I said, it'll be, you'll have, you know, single pilot, single PIC, basic 135, 135 on demand, commuter. You'll have A008. The belief is we'll have it, well, not the belief, it will be tailored to those kinds of operations as such. Accordance with 119, the operator then will have 30 days to write back and say, I can't do this, I don't understand it, whatever the situation is. There is a process in 119. We will follow that. The expectation is that since we have been notifying groups about this, and NBA and NATA claim to cover 85% of all 135 operations out there in one form or the other, we're trying to reach out to the other 15% that may not have heard this. Nevertheless, we will give them 30 days to tell us why they can't meet these requirements. After that, and I won't go through every one of the steps in 119 that talks about when the administrator issues an OPSPEC, then it will become law unless they have a compelling argument as to why they can't, should not, these requirements should not be placed on them. With that said, that concludes the reading of the will. This concludes, hold on, the OPSPEC and the formal part of the presentation. First of all, I want to thank Larry, certainly Doug and Alan, for the opportunity to talk to you all, and certainly for your attention, questions, and whatever. It's important. It is a safety-related issue. The operators have been asking, some of the operators have been asking this for a long time. Said, FAA, what took you so long to wake up? And we're waking up, and we're trying to meet the requirements. This is a first step. It is not a perfect step. It is a first step. With that said, and the thank yous aside, any questions? Yes, sir.
The OPSPEC uses the term direct employee.
Correct.
Being our agent.
Uh-huh.
How does that differ from an employee being our agent?
A direct employee is one that is paid by sometimes we throw as a W-2 employee. Direct employee is that direct employee. So one-on-one role. You're a direct employee, the FAA. You're not a contractor. I don't think you're a contractor. Contractor, and you're not an agent. You're a direct employee. You're paid by FAA. FAA controls your.
So how's that? What's the significance of that in the OPSPEC then?
Sometimes.
Implying that an indirect employee, the
No.
holder is not responsible for them?
No. I don't know what an indirect employee would be or an agent. I'm trying to say that no matter what, whether you pay that employee, there was at one time the op spec read that you had to pay all the employees. The argument that started there was, in other words, everybody had to be a direct employee, you had to pay their salary and all that. The argument was, well, what if I gave you $1? Would that give me the sort of leverage as I trip over this? Would that give me the leverage? What if I paid you $10? What if I paid you $100? So the whole issue of the W-2 as to who actually paid the pilots, we said, all right, but they've got to fall into one of two categories. They're either a direct employee, a W-2 employee, I pay your salary, you work for me, it says United Airlines on my deal, or I'm at least your agent. Whenever, regardless of what this says, or whether it doesn't say anything, let's put it that way, that the pilot understands, even if I'm not paid by that certificate holder, I am his agent when I am performing for him, and he is accountable for my actions or inactions.
Just one point of clarification, to simplify so we have no questions. Direct employee is a term of art. It will equal employee under a W-2. So just don't, you don't need to question it anymore. It's a term of art, and that's the distinction we draw, the carrier's employee and the agent.
No? Yes? Still
Yeah,
confused?
yeah.
Okay,
Nailed it.
good. Questions, thoughts? If not, thank you all for your time and attention. You'll be seeing more of this as you go along. Thank you very much.